Hello friends, and welcome to Eclexia. It is currently October, which means I am extraordinarily busy doing strange, bizarre things like scaring people and selling Victorian bodices and teaching people about horrible tragedies that happened in theme parks. Yes, I have done all of those things in the last 24 hours. However, in the meantime, I thought I would take some time to discuss a little bit of call it morbid weirdness. I'm going to talk about 10 of my favorite grave sites. Now, these are not necessarily my favorite burials. These are not necessarily my favorite deaths. These are just 10 graves themselves that I find to be completely fascinating and bizarre. The first one I'm going to mention was right up the road from me. This was in Alexandria, Virginia, and it is the tomb of the female stranger. The story goes that a wealthy-seeming couple mysteriously arrived in Alexandria, and the woman who they believed was the wife was ill. Soon she passed away. Before her death, her husband, or who they believed was her husband, called for a priest, and then promptly swore the priest to secrecy. Nobody knows who she was, and right after she was buried, the husband left town. There were several theories, such as the belief that perhaps the man wasn't her husband at all, but was a servant of some kind playing the role to try to obscure her identity. Another theory states that they were somehow wealthy nobles who had been, for one reason or another, forbidden to marry, and so they fled. Either way, nobody knows, but her gravestone does feature a very strange poem. William Jeffrey. This man was buried in a rock in North Carolina. Yes, a rock. His dying wish was to be buried in a rock. His father made certain it happened. It took the stone carver over a year to carve into the massive boulder that was chosen for this. Bizarrely, the marble slab, the marker, and all other signs and indicators that there's a grave there are gone. So now, you can just walk into the woods in North Carolina and see a regular-looking boulder with a corpse in it. Carra. She was a Hungarian actress, active during World War II. She was eventually arrested for helping the Allied forces by hiding refugees in her home. When she was freed, she ran away to New York, where she opened a hat shop, and then, eventually, she died. Her tomb, however, is absolutely beautiful. She has this massive carved candle over it. Rufus D. Case. This strange, tall grave is located in Mississippi, and it is shaped this way so that Rufus, a very proud man, could be buried sitting up in his favorite rocking chair, facing his home state of Louisiana. Nadine Earls. This 4-year-old girl desperately wanted a dollhouse for Christmas, and her father was pulling long hours to make certain she got it. But then, a week before Christmas Day, she passed away from a case of diphtheria. Her grief-stricken parents, unable to give her a dollhouse in life, gave her one in death. They built around her grave a giant dollhouse filled with toys and dolls for her to play with. You can still visit it today. Mary and Jonathan Reed. Mary passed away in 1893, but her husband was not having it. He built her a massive tomb in which he installed a second casket for himself, which is normal, and a wood stove, regular furniture for him to sit on, table and chairs, stand for their pet parrot, and then he moved in. And he lived there, took all his meals there, and stayed talking to Mary as if she was alive for 10 years. Timothy Clark Smith died in 1893. He was a doctor and had been terrified of being buried alive, so he took precautions. His grave featured a bell he could ring, an air hose so he wouldn't suffocate, and a glass window above him so people walking past could actually look down into his grave and see his body. And then, because that of course was not enough, he also had installed a stairway so that he could just get out of his casket and walk up to the surface if he needed to. Herman Lootis. This man fell in love with a sculptor's muse while visiting Europe. He proposed marriage to her. She declined. So, because he couldn't have the real one, Herman took a statue of his beloved home with him and lived with it in his house for several years. Then he had the statue moved to his family burial plot. He installed a stone box over her with a glass front in front of her to protect her, to keep her from weathering. Then Herman died, and he was buried at her feet. Florence Irene. Little 10-year-old Florence was always terrified of storms, and her mother would come and comfort her. She would sing to her, tell her stories, just be near her. When Florence died, her mother had her casket built with a window in it, and Florence's grave features a set of stairs behind heavy metal doors. These stairs lead down to Florence's casket, and during thunderstorms, her mother would rush to the cemetery to say and sing and comfort her daughter, even in death. Nancy Barnett. She passed away in 1831 at the age of 39 and was buried in her family cemetery. Over the years, the path that led to this cemetery eventually turned into a road. Bodies were slowly removed to make way for the roadway, but Nancy's son was quite adamant that his mother would not be moved. Eventually, the road just swooped around her grave instead. Then, years later, another attempt was made to widen the road. This time, it was Nancy's grandson, perched atop her tombstone, wielding a shotgun that kept the work crews at bay. Eventually, the county gave in and the road was split, traffic going in one direction on one side of her tomb, and traffic going the other direction on the opposite side. There is a strange addition to this story because in 2016, finally, due to construction once again, Nancy's grave was opened up and moved. The problem is when archaeologists went to dig Nancy up, there was not one, but 7 bodies in this burial site. We do not know who the other 6 were. As always, thank you for joining me here on Eclexia for my weird little interests. If you have any graves that you particularly like, because I know I've got followers out there who like weird graves, please let me know, mention them in the comments. Maybe there will be a follow-up video to this because it was really hard to pick just 10. Thank you as always, and I will see you next time.